Welcome to the Corpus Christi Public Libraries Crafters Corner.
Today on Crafters Corner, we'll be making embroidered Christmas ornaments. The supplies you'll need is an embroidery hoop, a pencil, some polyfill, embroidery floss, some Christmas ribbon, pins, as well as embroidery needles, some scissors, linen fabric, and Christmas fabric for your backing. Optional supplies is this iron-on tracing paper and some fray check. So what you first want to do is get out your linen, and you're going to want to put your image onto the linen. Now I printed mine out and I've already put it on the tracing paper that I'm going to use to iron on. However, if you don't have the iron on, you can just of course put your printed out image underneath and trace it out with a pencil. Now when you're doing the iron on, you want to make sure your iron is very hot, so be careful with your fingers, and you're going to want to make sure you cover the entire image. You want to go over a few times just to make sure it stays. The other good thing I like about the iron on is that you can use the same image a few times. And there we go. Now if the iron-on image is too light for you, you can always still trace it out again with pencil to make the lines a little darker. Alright, now it's time to put the image onto my embroidery hoop. So I'm going to separate the hoop. I need that inner circle. Place that on the bottom. Then my fabric right over it. I want my image centered in the circle. And then I'm going to place the top one on it. I'm going to tighten this screw right up top till it's all the way tight. Now my fabric is still a little too loose, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip it where my image is down. I'm going to pull all my fabric up. Now while I'm pulling the fabric up, I'm going to push down on this inner hoop, so that way it doesn't slip out. Now when doing this, it might stretch out my image, but that's okay. Once you take it off the hoop, the image goes back to its original shape. Alright, that's nice and tight. You want it to kind of sound like a little drum. Alright, now it's time to cut our embroidery floss. Now you're going to want to pull out roughly 24 inches. You'll never want to go too much, because as you sew, it might get a little tangled. Now before I sew, I want to separate out my embroidery floss, because I don't like it too thick. Now each embroidery floss has about 6 strings. So I separate them right down the middle, 3 and 3. Alright, so now I've got it separated out. I can go ahead and place it on my needle and start sewing. Don't forget to tie a knot at the end so it doesn't slip through when you're sewing. Alright, so let's get started. Alright, now we're ready to sew. So I'll get my needle. I'm going to go through the back and pull it all the way through. Now I don't want my stitch too long because over time it'll get loose. So we're just going to go about 1/4 of an inch to maybe half. Put my needle, go all the way through again. Now this part, you can do it various ways. Now you can skip a spot and go forward, and it'll give you that little stitch look. Or we can do it the way I prefer and go back a little bit and go through the same stitch. Not the same hole, but just a couple of squares back. So let me show you what it looks like on the back. That's where I went through the first time, and this is where I'm going through next. Just that one little space. I'll pull it and go all the way through again. So it gives it a nice clean little line. Now occasionally when you're doing this, it might give a small gap, but I'm going to go around a few times, about 3 or 4, so it'll fill in all that space. Now when you're doing the straight stitch, it's perfectly fine to do that 1 1/2, about 1/4 to 1/2 inch. Now, but when you get to this curve here, you're going to want your stitches a lot smaller, because when you're doing straight lines, it's going to give it a blocky look. But if you do smaller stitches, it'll give it a nice curved look. All right, now my stitching's all done. I went around about 3 or 4 times. And I did the same with my snowflake and added a little extra embellishment just to help my snowflake stand out a little bit more. Now what you could do is right when you take it out of the hoop, as you can see, it still kind of has that outline of the hoop. Just give it a quick iron just to get rid of any of those wrinkles. So now I'm ready to make my ornament. So first I'll get my Christmas fabric, place it face down, get my embroidered image, center that. Now I'm going to use the inner hoop of my embroidery hoop just to make my circle. Now if you have something bigger, you can use something a little bit bigger, but I'm going to use this for the example today. I'm just going to trace that because this is where I'm going to make my stitching for the ornament. Go all the way around. Now, before I start sewing, I have to remember I have to keep a space open up here because that's where I'm going to put my filling and also add my ribbon. I'll go and put some pins so we'll keep everything together because I am doing this one by hand as well. And 3 pins should do the trick. Alright, so I cut some of my embroidery floss. I decided to use red for my going around. And I'm going to use the entire thing. I'm not going to separate it like I did when I did this part. So I'm going to start on that little spot I had made. And you're going to want to hold it and pull it tight between your index and middle finger and your thumb and ring finger, just to kind of keep it tight. Just pull it through. And then I'm just going to go small stitches again, not too small, so about 1/2 inch, 1/4 inch. Now this time, unlike last time, I'm going to actually make a space. So instead of going right through it like I did last time, I'm going to skip that another 1/4 or 1/2. And this gives it this nice little stitch look. Now don't pull too tight because then it gives you that fold and you don't want that. That's why you want to keep kind of pulling the fabric to keep it flat for you. And you just do this and go all the way around. Now when you're done, you can either keep it like this, or if you want, because it is going to be seen on the back, not too much because of this fabric, you can pull through the same stitch and cover up these stitches here if you wanted. And that's what I did on my other one. So then you can have a full seamless line. But of course, as always, it's up to you. So now I've already sewed my image, and I went ahead and about 1/4 inch for my stitching, I cut around, and I used a little bit of fray check. That way these edges kind of stay nice and neat. Of course, if you want, you can fray the edges a little bit and then put some fray check just so they stay that way. Alright, and before I start filling, I just wanted to make a mention that I did leave my embroidery floss connected still, just because I'm going to use that same embroidery floss to sew over these edges right here. Alright, so we can go ahead and fill it. That polyfill. Now you can stuff it as much as you'd like. Alright, now I've got my ornament all filled. I cut my ribbon about 14 inches. So I'm going to fold it up, get the ends and put them inside the ornament, and sew it up. And there you have your embroidered Christmas ornament. Thank you for watching, and join us next time on Crafter's Corner.